Yo, what is up, guys? It's Cone back here again today with another video. The Boston Celtics, as of last night, have been eliminated from the NBA playoffs in a 5-game series against the Brooklyn Nets. To be honest, I thought it was going to be a sweep, and I don't think anyone predicted that the Boston Celtics were going to win this series. With Jaylen Brown out for the rest of the season, a very depleted roster, and just overall a talent mismatch with the Brooklyn Nets having their big three, no one really thought Boston was going to win. Like I said, I thought it was going to be a sweep, but Tatum, playing like the potential future MVP that he is, took one game scoring 50 points. It was an impressive performance, and Tatum all season has been an incredible player. I've said in previous videos, I really never knew if he was going to get up to this superstar level player that he is becoming today, but I'm very happy to see that he is. Alongside of that, Jaylen Brown had an incredible season, becoming an all-star for the first time, proving how much he has earned that max contract that the Celtics gave him. Despite those two players' great performances, though, this was a really disappointing year for the Boston Celtics, and after this series loss, they're already making major changes. Brad Stevens is out as their head coach, and he's joining their front office as their president of basketball operations. He's basically going to be handling all the trades, all the signings, which is going to be weird to see for a guy, Brad Stevens, who I think of only as a coach. I never could have foreseen him at this point in his career joining a front office. I thought he was going to be a guy to finally lead the Celtics back to a title. I tweeted out like a year or so ago when they gave him a contract extension. I said Brad Stevens is going to lead this Celtics team to at least a title. And now, he's not even their head coach anymore. It's weird to say, and of course, with that happening, Danny Ainge is out as their GM, and overall, I like these moves. I think that the only part of it I really don't like is the fact that Brad Stevens won't be coaching anymore, but I'll talk about who I think they should hire in a second. But for the moves themselves, I think Brad Stevens is a great basketball mind, and I think giving him up, like if they had just fired him as their coach, would have been a huge mistake. He additionally said that coaching was kind of wearing him out, which I can understand. Having the pressure of being a head coach in a city like Boston that expects winning now and not quite getting those results with, frankly, rosters that don't really have the championship potential that they should probably, it's understandable that he would be stressed after dealing with the bubble, after dealing with a couple seasons back to back. It's just been tough for him. So I understand him not wanting to coach at this point in his career. I wouldn't be surprised if he made a return to coaching at some point. But for right now, I think he's going to be great in the front office. I think it's going to be a nice change of scenery. Danny Ainge had some really good moments. Recently, he's kind of struggled, but don't forget how good Danny Ainge was for a lot of his time in Boston. He wouldn't have lasted this long as a general manager if he sucked, especially in a city like I said with Boston that expects winning now. So Danny Ainge did have some great moments, namely that trade years ago between him and the Brooklyn Nets, which poetically, the Brooklyn Nets were the team to eliminate them in his last playoff series as the general manager. But between a series like that, or a trade like that, and just other trades where he got picks, he got assets, Danny Ainge did a good job. It was just really the problem was that he was never able to cash in those assets. He would get assets, like he got the first overall pick, and he ended up getting Jason Tatum out of that, which was great. But he had a lot of trade pieces, he had picks, he had all these different options, and they just really never turned into anything great. Like, they made a couple Eastern Conference Finals runs, and they almost made a Finals run. But this roster has never quite felt like the championship contender that with a guy like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kemba Walker, a pretty big signing for the Boston Celtics a couple seasons ago, it felt like this team was going to try and compete for a title, as well as having disappointing seasons like in 2018 when the Boston Celtics had Kyrie, Marcus Morris, Al Horford, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, amongst other guys like Marcus Smart. It felt like that team should have been better than they were. They just never quite lived up to what they were going for. And so it's understandable that Danny Ainge's tenure is now ending in Boston. I'm pretty sure they said he's kind of like retiring or he's stepping away from it. But I think this is kind of a mutual thing. I think Boston needs to move on. I think they need a new direction. Because to be honest, this Boston team's kind of gotten stale. I understand Brad Stevens not wanting to coach. I get it. But he is a good coach. He just is. Like, I understand there were some people who had problems with kind of what he was doing this season, but you've got to remember that this Boston Celtics team, the reason why they were so disappointing this year wasn't just that the team wasn't quite up to par in terms of depth. They didn't have a lot of great bench play. They needed some more role players. A lot of their guys were super young, but they also dealt with a ton of injuries, a ton of COVID-related issues. Jason Tatum missed time. Jaylen Brown missed the end of the season. Kemba Walker missed a lot of time throughout the year. Marcus Smart missed time. There were so many different guys that missed time, it's hard to keep track with all of them. So it's understandable that they struggled this season. And I think ultimately the disappointing factor was not Brad Stevens' fault. It's not Jaylen Brown's fault. It's not Jason Tatum's fault. As much as some of the national media wants to make you believe that this team needs to break up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I think that'd be really stupid. I think those two players are an incredible fit together, and I think they can bring a championship back to Boston. The question is what should go around them. And really that's what I want to talk about for the rest of this video is what's next for them in terms of what players should go around them. Who should they pick up in free agency? What moves should they make? What direction should they go? Real quick, before I talk about that, I do want to mention who I would pick up if I were them in terms of the head coaching position, because that's now the most immediate glaring issue is that they don't have a head coach. And unless you plan on having Jason Tatum do even more for this team than he already does and have him head coach as well as score 60 a night, you've got to find someone. And I think this needs to be a fresh face. The first report that came out, I think it was from Chris Haynes, said that the first two guys they were looking at are Jason Kidd and Lloyd Pierce. I would hate either of those pickups. They might do a great job. They might. But if I'm Boston and I'm Brad Stevens, which is crazy to say, and I'm looking for a head coach, it's going to take a little bit to get used to him being their GM. But if I'm Brad Stevens, I'm looking for a fresh face, someone who has not head coached before or someone who has little experience head coaching. I'm talking faces like a Chauncey Billups maybe a Sam Cassell, a Becky Hammond, someone like that. Those are the people I'm looking at. Maybe a David Vanterpool. I'm looking for someone who has not had head coaching experience before. I'm looking at the Golden State Warriors as my model. Obviously, they probably won't be the Golden State Warriors, but they're a team that has kind of not quite met the expectations, or they feel like they have the potential to be more than they are right now. And without a coach, what the Warriors did was they brought in Steve Kerr, a brand new face, and it just completely changed the franchise. That's what I think the Celtics need to do. The way that Jason Tatum is progressing, I think he's going to be an MVP candidate potentially next season. So they need to capitalize now. And I think that includes bringing in a fresh face that knows what to do. And I think Brad Stevens is a great guy to handle that GMing spot. I think that he knows through his coaching experience with these guys, he knows what Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown need around them. He knows what they need in terms of a coach. He knows what they need in terms of talent. And there's some reports with Danny Ainge that teams stopped wanting to trade with him because he kind of kept backing out. He was kind of hesitant. He was wishy-washy on some stuff. So I think Brad Stevens is a fresh face, not only in those trades, but in terms of bringing in a head coach that's going to fit this roster. I think he's going to do a really good job. I just really hope it's someone new. I think that's the way to go. And I think any of those candidates that I mentioned, there are plenty of others as well. Maybe they could look at some assistant coaches. Maybe they could look at G League type stuff. The Thunder hired our G League head coach. We promoted him from G League to Thunder head coach, and I thought he did a phenomenal job in his first season. So maybe that's a recipe as well. There are some options here for the Boston Celtics, and I think they will end up making the right pick. I just hope that it's not someone who we've seen before. In terms of the roster itself, I have their salary cap table pulled up right here. Kemba Walker's got a couple more years. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are locked up completely. They're not going anywhere. I think the move you need to make is a Kemba Walker move. I have this weird feeling that Kemba Walker has played his last game as a Boston Celtic. And I know that's hard to say because he has a ton of bad money on the books. Or not bad money, but he's making a lot of money more than what his production was this season. And I do think Kemba Walker still has some production in him. He still can be a good scorer on nights. He's a solid playmaker. It's just that his defense isn't quite there, and as he ages and his offensive production falls, he doesn't have the defense to really back that up, and so he's starting to become a negative at times. So, how do they move him? I have no idea. There's some moves that I've seen people throw out there. I've seen people throw out maybe trading him for like an Al Horford or something like that, finding a way to bring Horford back to the Celtics. And as a Thunder fan, like it would be cool to have Kemba Walker and all that. I really don't want his money on the books, but at the same time, if we're trading Horford, like Horford's money, he's making a lot too, so it makes sense that we'd have to bring in a lot of money as well. But I would like, if the Celtics were going to give us Kemba Walker for Al Horford, to give us like a pick or a young piece or something like that. There's also, I saw someone mention a Kemba Walker for Kristaps Porzingis trade, which seems really gross. Seems really gross on like the surface of it, but it's honestly a trade that could benefit both sides. If the Mavericks decide they don't want to stay with Porzingis, they want a new change of, or they want a change of scenery. They want to bring in Kemba Walker, someone who can also be a playmaker alongside Luka Doncic, which is something that the Mavericks need desperately, because when Luka's not on the court, no one is playmaking for them. So maybe bringing him in could be a solution. I don't know. The Celtics would probably throw in a young piece in there as well, because like I said, Kemba Walker's getting old and Kristaps is much, much, much younger. So They'd have to throw in some young piece as well, maybe like an Aaron Nesmith or a pick or something like that. I don't know, just throwing ideas out there. But for some reason, I feel like Kemba Walker has played his last game as a Boston Celtic. Where he ends up, I don't know. Maybe he is on the Celtics next season. But this team feels like I said, they feel stale, and it feels like something big is coming to shake that up. That also might include a Marcus Smart trade, who's on the books for one more season. Next year is his final year. And if the Celtics don't want to pay him a ton of money, next year might be the year to move him. I like him a lot as a Celtic. I think he fits well in this roster. But if he's a piece that teams look at and they're like, I want that guy on my team, and someone is willing to give up a second star for him, or a third star, excuse me, alongside Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I think that's something you have to pull the trigger on. I think Brad Stevens understands that this team needs a third star, and it doesn't look like Kemba Walker is the star that this team needs. So I think there's going to be some big move coming. Tristan Thompson's on the books for next season as well. Romeo Langford, who showed some productive moments, is also on the books. Aaron Nesmith, who I think is going to be really productive for the Celtics next year. I love what he did down the stretch and in the playoffs. I thought he showed a lot of great flashes of not only being a scorer, but a solid defender, a playmaker, a hustle guy, maybe like a Marcus Smart light type kind of thing with worse defense and better shooting. Who knows? Grant Williams wasn't very good this season. He's on the books for a season, and then he has a team option. Luke Cornett's gone. Peyton Pritchard, who was super productive as a rookie, is under team control for 3 more seasons, so that's good for the Boston Celtics. I think he was a steal at his draft pick. We could also talk about Robert Williams, who I think is the future of their center position. He is also still under contract, so they don't have to pay him. Really, the only guy of note that they're going to have to probably pay is Evan Fournier if they want to bring him back. And I think he would be a solid piece to bring back if he's not asking for too much money. I don't think you want to pay Evan Fournier like $20 million. If you can get him for like 15, maybe like around the 17 that he's making right now, I think that's a solid pickup, assuming he can play up to the 20 point per game type score that he showed potential to be on the Orlando Magic. The Boston Celtics need that scoring, and I think he has the potential to be a great bench scorer for this team. So going forward in terms of free agency, they really don't have money. Like I mentioned, a lot of guys on the books. Kemba, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, and Marcus Smart, those 4 guys basically take up almost all of their cap space already. Then you throw in $9 million for Tristan Thompson, $3 million for Romeo Langford, Aaron Nesmith, and you keep going down the list. This team really just doesn't have money to make any moves in free agency. So it's going to be an interesting first offseason for Brad Stevens as a general manager, trying to navigate ways to get this team more talent, get this team back to contention, get this team back to the level that they showed last season, the season before, and the season before that. So what's next for the Boston Celtics? I don't know. I really did not expect all that to happen this morning before I recorded this video. I had this video pretty much planned out, and I had to redo things because the Celtics made those massive moves. But I think in the long term, it's going to help them out. I think it's going to be beneficial. I like what they're doing, and I do think they're going to make good decisions. I think Brad Stevens, I've said it multiple times in this video, he's super smart. He's a really good basketball mind. And I think he's going to make a move this season. I'm going to make a prediction now. The Boston Celtics are going to be back in that upper echelon of Eastern Conference teams next season. I think they make some big trade, 1, maybe 2. They get some solid role players around the 2 stars that they have. And I think Jaylen Brown's continued rise and Jason Tatum, who has shown that he is going to be a superstar in this league sooner than later at just the age of 23, as well as become, I think he's going to win an MVP at some point in his career. And I think next season he might start competing for that with how good he is. I think all of that combined, I see the Celtics returning to the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference next season. Whether or not that means they win the East, or if they're able to compete with like the likes of Milwaukee, the big 3 out there in Brooklyn or Philly, we'll see. But I do think they're going to be that 4th team alongside those 3 teams. Of course, there's a ton of there's still all the playoffs left. There could be injuries, praying there's not, knock on wood. Joel Embiid does have a slight meniscus tear, but I'm hoping that's nothing serious. But in terms of the Eastern Conference's future, there are still those 3 really tough teams, but I do think the Celtics are going to be back up there. So, Celtics fans, I think there's a lot to be excited about. I hope you guys are excited, or you guys are as optimistic about your future as I am. I think they showed a lot of flashes at the end of the season with this team. I do think, like I said, there needs to be some work done, but I think a future starting lineup of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Robert Williams, and maybe some like third star alongside whoever else you want to throw in there, whether it's Marcus Smart, whether it is Kemba Walker, whether it's neither of those guys, and you got another piece for one of those 2. Who knows? I think with that core, though, of Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and maybe like a Robert Williams, as well as some of those young guys in Peyton Pritchard, Romeo Langford, Aaron Nesmith, there's stuff to build on. So This season wasn't all lost for the Boston Celtics, not at all how the fans or the front office envisioned it going, but there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Celtics fan. So I appreciate you guys watching this video. Let me know what you think about the Boston Celtics front office moves. Let me know what you think what this team should do coming up. Should they trade Kemba Walker? Is it time to move on from Marcus Smart? What's the third star they can go out there and pick up? Do you think Brad Stevens is going to do a good job? And where do you see the Celtics going for next season? Do you think they're going to return to the Eastern Conference Finals? Do you think they'll be an Eastern Conference contender, a title contender? What do you see for the Boston Celtics next season? I appreciate you guys watching this video. I will see you guys later. Real one, say it back.